delegația EBA, deci prima delegație EBA în Republica Moldova, formată din 10 companii, deci companiile din America vor să investească în țări ca în Republica Moldova și pentru că au regulamente transparente. Știu că Republica Moldova își consolidează capacitățile de investiție. Vrem să investim în Republica Moldova și abia așteptăm să vedem un acces mai mare la piețele capitale. Statele Unite, în programele noastre USAID, lucrează activ pentru a adresa reformele politice și în parteneriat cu asociațiile de afaceri din Republica Moldova, întreprinderile guvernamentale. Deci vreau să putem celebra împreună oportunitatea Republicii Moldova de a accede la Uniunea Europeană în curând. Mulțumesc foarte mult! Mulțumesc frumos, domnule ambasador, pentru aceste opțiuni. Vreau acum să invit pe domnul Ianis Mazeix, ambasadorul Delegației Uniunii Europene în Republica Moldova. Doamnelor și domnilor, excelențe, onorați participanți, acest eveniment are de sens dezvoltarea pieței capitale din Republica Moldova și deschide oportunități companiilor din Republica Moldova să-și facă afaceri în afara granițelor și să construiască parteneriate cu întreprinderi. Trecem prin perioade dificile cu toții. Criza generată de pandemia COVID este urmată de criza energetică și de această invaziune nejustificată a Rusiei în Ucraina, lucruri care au adus instabilitate și incertitudine pentru toți. Afacerile noastre au fost afectate, ale tuturor foarte mult. Noi suntem bucuroși să vedem eforturile companiilor să se dezvolte în pofida tuturor provocărilor. Mă bucur foarte mult să particip în aceste evenimente simulare organizate de MAIB și Piața de Valori de București în septembrie. Oportunitățile de investire în Republica Moldova sunt mari, deși acestea sunt esențiale pentru dezvoltarea Republicii Moldova economiei. În iunie, Republica Moldova a obținut statutul de țară candidat pentru UE. Asta este o posibilitate suplimentară pentru a dezvolta integrarea economică. Deci acest acord liber.
Сейчас запущено много реформ, и мы их приветствуем, и мы надеемся, что эти реформы придут к изменению экономического климата и приведет к дальнейшему развитию. Я не могу переоценить важность экономического климата и закона, прозрачные процедуры и процесс принятия решений являются главными для развития вашего рынка, и чтобы Молдова смогла в дальнейшем забрать свое достойное место в европейской семье. Последнее, к сожалению, инвестиционный климат Молдовы оставляет желать лучшего из-за событий, которые мы раньше упоминали, из-за определенных вещей, которые происходили в экономике Молдовы. Это тоже повлияло, но инвестиционный климат банковской сферы постоянно меняется и улучшается. Также вы знаете, что ситуация с МАИБ также вызывала определенные сложности, но мы верим, что Молдова сейчас может стать на новый путь, может развить свою экономику, и реформы в финансовом секторе, а также в административном секторе, по которой мы говорили, слышали. Сейчас я хочу пригласить Октавиана Армашу, губернатора Национального банка Украины.
Allow me to welcome this event.
Разрешите мне поблагодарить вас, поблагодарить всех присутствующих, поприветствовать инвесторов, которые потенциально будут. Я благодарю за открытость румынской власти и представителей румынской биржи. Это открывает путь международным инвесторам на рынок Молдовы. Как евробонды, акции представляют
At this point, I have to emphasize that MAIB is not just an ordinary private issuer. MAIB is a systemic bank and the largest bank in the country. Any risk to the largest bank is an implicit risk to the entire country. Moreover, we may become the first country in the region where a bank will be listed on other markets than domestic, and may be not listed at all on the domestic stock exchange. This means that we, the central bank, are the first, and we cannot learn from other central banks. We have to explore this matter and find solution on our own. That is the reason NBM took a very careful and prudent approach from the very beginning of this process. There are a few aspects that NBM is looking at, mainly those that are implemented as a response to the banking crisis back in 2014. These were the limitations implemented under and instruments implemented under the IMF-led banking sector reform, and were meant to ensure transparency of bank shareholders, an instrument given to central bank to effectively supervise shareholders. I will go quickly through some of them. So the maximal holdings that do not require central bank authorization are currently set at 1%, which seem to be tight for an IPO. Residents from non-transparent jurisdictions are not allowed to acquire shares in Moldovan bank. Some large international institutional investors are operating through such jurisdictions. Shareholders' obligation to disclose the information about nominal holders and ultimate beneficiary owners. This is fully enforced in our domestic market. The ability of the central bank to apply supervisory instruments on shareholders who prove to be not fit and proper. Shareholders are the foundation of bank stability. We have to ensure that after the IPO, we have stability in the bank governing bodies, like General Assembly and Bank Supervisory Board. Shareholders have the role to support the bank in difficult times. We have to make sure that this role is assumed by shareholders of the bank and can be effectively implemented. NBM is actively looking for solutions to above mentioned problems and issues. We are in intense discussions with MAIB management. We paid a visit to Agency for Financial Stability from Bucharest, and we have advanced in identifying solutions for NBM supervisory actions in action on Romanian market. We have also received some very helpful evaluations from Romanian colleagues supporting our path forward. We are still looking for a solution related to disclosure of information about shareholders. We still see it is very problematic to allow investors from non-transparent jurisdictions to buy shares in Moldovan banks. We are still looking for an acceptable solution for reporting and disclosure information about shareholders. We still need to work on strategies that would ensure well-functioning, of governing bodies of the bank and the shareholders' commitment to support the bank in difficult times. Development of the country and well-being of citizens. This must be the common objective for private entities and authorities. And investors play a key role in this process. There is still a lot of work to be done. I hope today's discussion will help to bring more light on the problems that I have mentioned. I wish all of us a success at today's forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Governor. Now I'd like to invite one of the largest investor in Moldova, EBRD, Ms. Angela Sachs.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Georgi, for inviting me to speak on the topic that is very dear to EBRD, and it's an essential building block of the Moldovan economy. We have some developing to do, obviously, in the capital market area, which you heard very clearly from the governor, and I think we all agree on that. Access to international capital markets has the potential to unlock significant investments while diversifying funding sources for companies and strengthening financial system and economic resilience. The EBRD Moldova country strategy for the past 5 years has prioritized this important policy area. Going forward, we will continue to work with our stakeholders, with the regulators and market participants to support the regional integration of Moldovan financial markets as a key priority in our new country strategy 2023-2028, which in fact will be published imminently, if not this week, then potentially next week. This work features prominently in our strategic priorities for Moldova because, unfortunately, the development of capital markets is not a given. They do not necessarily develop organically, and this process is much more difficult in smaller economies where markets suffer from what we call the tyranny of size. Making capital markets a meaningful source of financing has to be a focus of a combined effort by both public and private stakeholders, and it can only be the product of an appropriately sequenced set of reforms and initiatives. This is why I'm particularly happy to be here today, because events like this that bring together prospective issuers and intermediaries as well as regulators and IFIs are crucial for creating capital market ecosystem and for driving forward this common goal. I mentioned the importance of sequencing because this is key to EBRD's approach to local capital market development. We believe, and this is neither groundbreaking nor contentious, in strategic priorities and fundamental reforms. In Moldova, our current capital market priorities are clear: money markets, capital market infrastructure, and regional integration. This is not to dismiss many other efforts that should be pursued concurrently, such as broadening the issuance pipeline, strengthening the regulatory framework, or expanding the product range, to name just a few. These are rather the priorities which we believe to be vital at this point in time that have the potential to act as catalysts for other efforts. Let me today quickly focus on the topic of the regional integration, not only because it relates so closely to the title of this conference, but also because it is an aspect of capital market development which really permeates all others. Our experience in the region and throughout our countries of operation has focused on two triggers of integration: the legal regulatory environment and the capital market infrastructure. The alignment of legal, regulatory and supervisory practices with the EU acquis will facilitate cross-border investment, strengthen financial resilience, and make Moldova an easier and more attractive place to invest. Receiving EU candidate status has already accelerated this process and will serve as an important anchor for reform in Moldova in all areas of the financial services. EBRD will continue to support Moldovan authorities with legal and regulatory reforms, building on our experience with regional market integration in other countries. We have just launched, in fact, we're launching today, our new technical assistance project, generously funded by the Dutch government, to design a capital market development strategy and a business plan potentially for a consolidated and a vertically integrated capital market infrastructure. We will also support the NCFM with strengthening the regulation and supervision of capital market infrastructure in Moldova. As we recently witnessed during Moldova-Romania Capital Bridges event in Bucharest, there is already considerable interest, international interest in Moldovan companies. We in EBRD aim to support such companies through technical assistance with the legal and regulatory alignment with the EU and initiatives promoting Moldova's integration with regional capital markets. I will conclude here, and I really wish you all a very interesting and engaging event today. Thank you.
Now, to close the first part of our event, I'd like to invite head of IMF of Moldova, Mr. Roger Chavan.
Thank you, George. So the good news is this is the last part. The bad news is I'll simply summarize what we have heard. I'm deeply grateful to be a part of this good event. We've worked very closely with MAIB, and this is an issue which is also part of our program, and I'm happy that we've been invited to participate in these discussions. I wanted to reflect on what has been said here by quoting a golfer, which is not good on a Monday, but one of the golfers, Walter Hagen, once said, "No one remembers who came in second." Some banks love being second. To some banks it's acceptable. To some banks it's also something which they can live with. But in a world that everyone strives to be the first or to look at the first mover, sometimes coming second could also look like losing. And so we are here to celebrate that MAIB is going to be first. And I wanted to summarize what has been said here by looking at the acronym FIRST. So the first letter stands for a forerunner. So from what we pick here, MAIB is going to be a forerunner in the International Stock Exchange for the financial sector in Moldova. Obviously, an IPO is construed as a good moment for a company which is maturing. And what is happening here is a sign of maturity as well as preparedness to operate in a different arena. By going public, MAIB would position itself to tap from a different set of investors. And the expectation is that there will be some spillovers to the Moldovan economy where we can see growth in entrepreneurship and job creation. Which leads us to the second thing, that this thing is only happening because there is innovation. By looking at the potential benefits that listing would give, you can see that there is an appreciable level of innovation which characterizes what MAIB is trying to do. Most businesses fail in terms of how to grow as well as how to support national objectives. But the resources generated from this kind of initiatives can create a thriving eco-financial system like EBRD said, open up new frontiers within the EU accession, as well as develop value proposition for MAIB. So a successful IPO would provide us a diversified portfolio of investments, at the same time open doors for creating more value-enhancing projects. By innovating, MAIB is trying to put Moldova on the map. The next letter stands for responsibility. Being first also comes with responsibility. And some of you have seen how impressively the financial system has reacted to the start of war on our borders. This did not happen by chance or luck. The resilience that we now see is a product of the investment that has been made in the financial sector. Specifically, we at the IMF have been working with banks in the aftermath of the banking fraud to ensure a transparent shareholding, create a robust resolution framework, at the same time also allow the strengthening of governance and supervisory frameworks. Now, this kind of investment has paid off. That is why, if I'm hearing correctly, learning from that experience, the governor is saying it is imperative that as MAIB goes public, we need to safeguard the resilience of the sector so that the post-initial offering should also be as stable as we are seeing it, which brings me to the S, which is stability. The preparatory actions that we're talking about must not only focus on MAIB. It's good that we're having this conversation because MAIB is only the first, but there will be others who are going to follow. So whatever we agree now, we need to make sure that there is scope for others to follow in a seamlessly easy fashion. So we see scope for coordination with the regulators. We see scope for coordination with the partners. We see scope for coordination with the international financial institutions. And this also allows the central bank to make sure that the transition of corporate governance as well as professional management structures also goes smoothly. For us, in our discussions, we have emphasized that whatever happens with the first initiative, we must make sure that the supervisory framework is not undermined. We also have emphasized the need to ensure that there is access to information. And most importantly, there is good coordination with the supervisors in the different jurisdictions, which comes to the last letter in the word first, which is T. Clearly, MAIB is going to be a trendsetter. Now, if done correctly, this IPO will be entrenched in our memories as a trendsetter. We know that there will be some spillovers. I think one of the things which has been articulated here is that for a small place like Moldova, a lot of people always ask, what is Moldova? Some of these initiatives are what will help us to put Moldova on the map. And by penetrating markets, this kind of information, which is normally demanded for a company which is listed, the level of disclosure will also allow for us to complement the gap of information which people have about Moldova. So we stand to benefit from this process of MAIB being a trendsetter. So I wanted to close with the hope that someday we'll remember that MAIB was first. And at that time, I look forward to remembering MAIB as a forerunner of innovation, which was responsible for fostering resilience and stability in the financial sector, setting the trends for other financial sectors to follow, other players to follow. I thank you for your attention, and I wish MAIB all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we are all trying to put Moldova on the map of the investors, and thank you very much for open discussions and trying to find solutions for every problem. Thank you again. With this, I would like to thank again our distinguished guests, and now we will ask the panel one to start. Thank you.
Dear ladies, dear gentlemen, allow us to launch the panel number 1 of this absolutely distinguished event, listing on international capital market. So the panel number 1 is about experience of a listed company. And the goal of this panel is to really share very insightful and practical recommendations and experience of our outstanding and keynote speakers. Also to really see and demystify the stock exchange context and to clarify the procedure, and last but not the least, what are the overall benefits of being listed in an international stock exchange. Saying this, dear ladies, dear gentlemen, allow me to invite Mr. Vasily Tofan, Purcari Chairman, Mr. George Shahidze, CEO of MAIB, Mr. Adrian Tanasi, CEO of Bucharest Stock Exchange, and Mr. Vytautas Klunskis, portfolio investor, head of private equity in Valda. My name is Mariana Rufa, and I am honored to represent European Business Association today. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, indeed we are speaking about a lot about the benefits of listed companies, about increase of visibility, about access to liquidity, about more transparency, but also about identifying a country which has more and more companies of this kind for attracting more investments. And in the terminology of the European Commission, we are speaking about companies' internationalization, a difficult word to pronounce. But let's ask Mr. Vasily Tofan, and who can share with us absolutely outstanding experience of the #1 company in Moldova, Purcari, who managed to become listed an international stock exchange. Mr. Vasily Tofan, what would be your experience, how it happened, and what it meant for Purcari?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a huge privilege to be here, and maybe starting from the truly inspiring speech given by Mr. Chavani with a beautiful first acronym. I think that MAIB indeed is going to be the first bank IPOing on a different stock exchange, but the first company who did so was Purcari, and I'm saying this as somebody who's very much in love with MAIB. And I say this not to pat ourselves on the back. I say this simply because, as in the case of MAIB, we've had multiple barriers to overcome. And maybe before I get to the barriers, and really my speech is not about saying how good Purcari is, but it's actually to encourage the people here in the room, because I think that's the main goal of this event. We as Moldova, we need very much the access to international capital markets. We are very short of long-term financing here. Yes, the banks have liquidity, less so after the very tight monetary policy run by the National Bank, rightly so, to address inflation. That is their mandate. But we have very little liquidity in the market, and we have even less long-term liquidity. Yes, our banks are lending for one year, 2 years, but we have very, very little financing for 5, 10 years projects. That's why we need the access to international capital markets. So, and indeed, we as a lot of the barriers that MAIB is seeing now, commercial barriers, because we indeed, as Mr. Chavani said, we need to explain people where Moldova is and why they should invest in a market that is bordering a war zone, but also regulatory barriers we have as MAIB, which I very much hope we will overcome. We must overcome. We don't have the luxury not to overcome them. But when we listed Purcari, I have to tell you that the barriers were also daunting. It's not that it was a walk in the park. First, let's start with the background. So very shortly, let's not forget that in September 2013, we had the Russian embargo. We were literally starved of cash. We lost our largest market overnight. We had $7 million of frozen account receivables in Russia. We had 6 months of unpaid payables to our Moldovan suppliers. We had 3-4 months of delays to our arrears to our employees in Moldova. So indeed, you know, going from that, from a near bankrupt company in 2013 to an IPO 5 years later, less than 5 years later, at a market cap of $100 million was quite a feat. And I really hope that this example of Purcari and the IPO that will happen next year of MAIB motivate lots of the corporates and SMEs here in the room that this is possible. If we, a bunch of farmers, managed to do the first IPO on an international stock exchange, I'm sure that the respectable larger companies here in this room will manage to do the same. And I'll be happy to elaborate in the subsequent questions on how we did it.
A bunch of very insightful answer. It also was about a lot of ambition behind and a lot of knowledge. And indeed, when it comes to knowledge, it's also important to consider the lessons learned, the experience of also international companies. So Mr. George Shahidze, you listed a similar size bank in similar country. Where is it now? So what would be your lessons learned and what would be your recommendations for listed companies on an international capital stock exchange?
Well, I'm interested party here, but I think I can tell a few words and draw a parallel between Georgia and Moldova, as well as between TBC Bank. I was deputy of leading its listing on the London Stock Exchange with the team, of course, and MAIB. And I think we should start by praising the excellent job of the NBM, who has preserved a strong banking sector with very strong capital, with strong liquidity, with the continuous improvement on the governance. This was the beginning of TBC's story as well. And the listing of TBC, and this is public company and everybody can check the numbers, enabled TBC to grow, become even better company from the perspective of corporate governance, even better company from the perspective of the transparency and the shareholders' evolution. And shareholders are key for, or the foundation for the bank's success. This is the public information. TBC not only is continuously supported by EBRD and IFC, who had been TBC's investors from early of 2000 and didn't leave them after IPO, but also people like Schroders, people like HSBC, Goldman Sachs, they joined TBC in the shareholding book. And this is exactly where we are going to look and who we are going to attract when we do the MAIB's IPO. And last week, in fact, on Thursday, we had the meetings with the similar investors, starting with HSBC, starting with the continuing with the with the Goldman Sachs and so on. And this is how the book will need to evolve. And in fact, after IPO, TBC became the largest company in Caucasus region, not only in Moldova, extending its digital services by increasing its digital services or number in digital services by 10 times. And if you compare Georgia and Moldova, there are so many similarities in the past, in the aspirations to become a member of European Union, especially last decision, so that Moldova became candidate of European Union. That means predictability for Moldova. This is key for new investors, right? Because they will invest only if they see the predictability of the country. And when we think about the small country, about 40% of the investor story is the country itself, it's the macro itself. So basically, the success of MAIB will mean the success of entire country, starting from the government, NBM, and the banking sector, of course.
Is of course the wine, and not in vain we have the first company listed in the wine sector, just to make another link. However, it is imperative also when we're speaking about international listing to have a very strong and operational and agile stock exchange. And in this regard, we really have 140 years of experience in the case of Bucharest Stock Exchange, and I'm sure that this very strong organization in the region is undergoing already modernized processes and is implementing really new digital services and digital products. Mr. Tanasi, we would like to kindly invite you to really share some of this experience, which is of course will be of a great value for the Republic of Moldova.
Thank you very much. Yes, next week we'll celebrate 140 years from the establishment of the first stock exchange in Romania. Of course, we have a pause in the communist era, but the modern era, so the stock exchange has been relaunched in 1995. Yeah. Of course, yes. For me, this is a very, very important. I'm getting very emotional now. It's very important initiative to have these very strong messages, and regarding the partnership between Moldova and Romania with the Bucharest Stock Exchange playing a very, very important role into this initiative. Of course, the evolution of the stock exchange, Bucharest Stock Exchange, has been very, it is very positive in the last few years. So I think you have all the arguments to become your partner, regardless of the, of course, natural and partnership which should happen between Romania and Moldova. The stock exchange, Bucharest Stock Exchange, has been promoted as a secondary emerging markets in 2020. You have very positive developments on the primary market developments. You are promoting all the values you are recognizing into European Union. And being ourselves a listed company, you are implementing into our company the values you are promoting to other companies. So as I said, you are seeing a lot of positive developments. You are trying to develop the infrastructure, of course. You have a very important project to establish central counterparty in Romania, so to enlarge the stock exchange products in the future. So, of course, everything is there. All the regulations you are working on are completely aligned with the European Union regulations. So this partnership, in my view, and having the first company Purcari here listed, and yes, next year having the MAIB IPO into the stock exchange, I think it will be a win-win situation for both our economies. I want to mention here that next year we'll have the biggest IPO, which will happen in the stock exchange, and into this region, the hydro power producer, Hidroelectrica, will be floated in the first part of the year, with a value of the IPO of 2 billion euros. So I think this is another argument to have this, to be optimistic, actually very optimistic about our partnership. So yeah, this is my. I have a lot of things to be said, but yes, for me, it's yes, this initiative, it's very valuable for the stock exchange, for Romania, and for Moldova, and I'm very optimistic that we'll materialize it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tănase. I'm sure you will materialize a lot, being really strong and the strongest maybe in the region. But let's now go to really an investor who is interested in investing in such countries also as Moldova, Mr. Vytautas Plunksnis. And of course, our natural question is, Mr. Vytautas, Moldova is a candidate country. A lot of reforms are already undergoing. We have a lot of commitments for rule of law, for other regulatory reforms, for the economic and business sector. What is an investor looking for when he's investing in a country? What's your experience from the point of view of an international investor?
So first thing, as you said, is rule of law and equal rules for everyone. And Moldova should not forget and not only strive to attract international investors, but all investors, local or international, should be treated equally. And so this is, I think, what the current government is doing, and fighting corruption, reforming all branches of the government, and you should continue. And what investors like is stability and predictability, which of course in this current geopolitical situation is not easy to achieve, but at least as a country you should do what depends on you. And other things, so I'm coming from the Baltics, and I cannot even remember when I last time had to go to some government agency. So basically you log in online. If you have some issue, need some paper, permit, you log in, fill in the request, and in due time the answer comes. And I would also encourage Moldova to digitalize everything what's possible, because it makes easier for the citizens, for investors, and also it might sound really a bit strange, but it also reduces corruption. Because if, for example, for construction permit, if you file online, it's clear when you filed, who looked at the files, and so on. So I would encourage Moldova to go digitalization route and be ahead, because as a small country, it's easier to achieve. If you so in the Baltics we have services of the government better than those of the big countries, because in big countries is a lot of procedures, a lot of things, and as a small country, it's really possible to succeed in this front.
Mr. Plunskins, the good news is that the Republic of Moldova is considering the digitalization process as a priority number one. So we hope that the things will move quicker. And indeed, it also is a result of the current context in which we are living from the social, economic, and operational point of view. Dear ladies and gentlemen, we all faced a big tragedy this year with the launching of the war, and I have to confess that business actually in the Republic of Moldova, as NGOs, as the government, have reacted very quickly. Mr. Tofan, what was the Purcari response to this refugee crisis, being also aware that the location of the company is really very close to the Ukrainian-Moldovan border? If you can share with us some experience in this regard.
Yes, of course. So we are a public company. This is one of the huge benefits of being a public company. As again, sorry, I'm quoting so much IMF had here, but I think you had a fantastic speech. It inspired me a lot, to be honest. But on the increasing the disclosure for companies, so that's one of the results of being a public company. So that means we have to publish all our numbers. They are there. They can be checked by customers, suppliers, by the tax authorities. We have nothing to hide. So if you're checking our numbers, you'll see that for 9 months, we grew revenues by 20%. I think this is remarkable, if you ask me, given the fact we had the war in Ukraine, we lost the Belarus market, you know, forget about Russia, like we don't even plan to sell there, and so on. So in that context, I think the 20% growth is very impressive. And frankly, our growth of profitability was also very good. So the short answer to your question, I think we did well. One of the reasons we did well is because since we took the public the company in 2018, we had to dramatically step up our level of corporate governance. We had to bring independent directors in the board. We had to bring professional management. We had to beef up our compliance function. We had to beef up our IT. We had to beef up things across the board. So one of the reasons we have the results we have today is because being a public company meant a huge step up. You know, so it's not by accident that we're growing 20% when the market is actually shrinking. It's because we had to step up as a public company. And here's my hope that we, as Moldova, just to give you some numbers, we simply, if we want, and sorry to get political here, but I think last year and the year before, the people of Moldova have given a huge mandate of confidence to a new political leadership, which is not corrupt, which is not stuck in all the schemes of the past. And these people have to make changes. Now, in order to make these changes, they cannot make them alone. I think it's only together with the business. Putting this in numbers, for us to step up as an economy, our level of investments as percentage of GDP, if you ask me, and looking at other examples, they have to be at around 20%. I think everybody can run these numbers. Our GDP is $15 million, give or take, 20% annual investments, so the I in the GDP formula is 3 billion. So the question is, do we have the 3 billions, you know, in long-term investments available locally? No, they are not available locally. To give you the example of Purcari, one of the reasons Purcari is doing well is because over the last 5 years, since the IPO, we have invested dramatically in CapEx. If you go to our winery in Stefan Voda, it looks like a rocket ship. I mean, we've invested like tens of millions of dollars there, so it's not by accident that we have this result. Now the question is, do we have these amounts as a country now? We don't. One of the primary reasons why we organize this event is for companies present here to get inspired by this, to have the courage to go list their companies on the main segment in Bucharest, on the Aero segment for the SME, issue equity, issue bonds. You will not get what you need only with MAIB loans or Victoria Bank loans or OTP loans. I hope everybody understands that. And I'm speaking here against a little bit MAIB, but you cannot build a successful country by investing like 3-4 percentage points of GDP. We need to invest 20 percentage points per year. So that's the reason we're having this event today. And that's the reason Purcari is doing well, because for the last 5 years we have been investing. I really hope that those present here today will kind of get inspired and go list, raise money, maybe first via bonds, then via equity, and invest those monies in production here. Because again, let's look at some of the numbers. Sorry, we have a trade gap that is absolutely embarrassing. So we export at, sorry, I don't know the latest numbers, but give or take 4 million this year, 4 billion this year will be, and we'll import at nearly double that level. You cannot build a successful country with a trade deficit of 4 billion. It means our tax collections on imported goods are higher than tax collections on local goods. The only way to change this is to start building stuff here. The only way to start building stuff here is by getting access to long-term capital. I think it's not rocket science. So that's what we need to do, and I hope the authorities will help us do that.
Thank you, Mr. Vasile. I'm sure everybody is convinced about that. Mr. Shahidze, we are speaking about this international experience. We are speaking about also competition, which MAIB has to face when being listed on international stock exchange. And when it's about competition, it's not only about the local market, but also international market. Now, considering what Mr. Plunskis mentioned previously, what Mr. Tanasi and Mr. Tofan mentioned previously, what are the really the insightful things that are happening in MAIB at the moment in terms of digitalization, in terms of your MAIB transformation process? What helps you to become really competitive on an international arena?
Of course. Maybe I can build on what Vasily said, that, and I understand after IPO, Purcari became one of the largest CE wine company, if not the largest wine company. And then this is not only due to the fact that people can access to the capital, but due to the fact that after IPO, you need to improve many things, including the governance, including the be more specific about your strategy, including to be very conservative and very accurate about the performance and so on. And one of the things that companies leave after IPO is that they are very closely compared to the peer group. So in banking, this would mean that people all over the world would compare MAIB and its strategy, its positioning, its innovation, its products to the best of the banks across the countries. When we go to Romania, that could be Romanian largest bank. When we go to Hungary, that will be their largest bank. And that will be the Poland, that will be Georgia, where I am come from. And the investors that we are meeting now, they are already asking questions. So how we are better than, let's say, this bank in the digitalization, how we are better than that bank in the branch network transformation and so on. But one thing I must say is that the transformation in the bank is not related to IPO. Transformation is related to continuously improve market position strategy of the bank and ensure its long-term success. Moldova, and just to continue on this matter, Moldova has this unique chance so that Moldovan companies can go and get access to the capital of Romanian stock exchange. The stock exchange, which is about 40 billion in market cap, which is welcoming Moldovan companies, which is welcoming Moldovan companies in every other sector. It is not banking only, or it is not wine industry only. Every other sector, Romanian stock exchange is open and welcoming Moldovan companies. That means more Moldovan companies complying with the best-in-class corporate governance, best-in-class strategic exercise, getting more money from Romania to invest in Moldova. That is the unique chance, and none of the other countries have such a chance. And I've been myself working across many countries, but yes, you go to an international stock exchange, but this international stock exchange has only financial or number-wise attachment to you. But here, I think it's more than only equity story as such. I think we can somehow find the way that Moldovan companies use this opportunity that exists there. Thank you.
And now the question is going to the Romanian Stock Exchange because we all noticed that the Romanian capital market actually did very well over the years. What was the role and the contribution and the value added of the Bursa de Valori București? And what do you think about MAIB being listed? How do you perceive this process from your point of view?
So yes, Romania did very well this year. If you are referring to the performance this year, so we have a positive performance, including the dividends year to date. So it has been very resilient. Yes, the main, and I want to refer here to the domestic investors community. We have a very strong domestic investors community. With the pension funds, you have a mandatory pension funds pillar. They have like 20 billion euros with a 25% investment in equities. They are continuously looking for the opportunities to invest. So this domestic investors pillar has played a very, very valuable role to this resilience of the market. Of course, the interest rates has increased as everywhere, yeah, and the appetite, yes, the conditions to list companies has deteriorated comparing with 2021 when we have a record of number of equities listings. Still this year we had like 10 equity listings, and yes, the community is very optimistic about the future, yeah? As soon as the conditions will normalize. So Romania has been very resilient, and the stock exchange, the Bucharest Stock Exchange, what is the role it has played during this period is that you have a lot of initiatives to speak with the community, to educate about the community, about how to manage the risk during this periods. Yeah? And you have like let's say you have an IR association which has been established a few years ago, learning the companies how to communicate with the investors community especially during these times. Yeah? You have also on the other side you have initiatives to learn investors how to manage the risk during this time when the market risk has materialized. So a lot of things has been done, and they are seeing a lot of positive things. Yeah, the number of investors are still increasing during this time. So we have doubled the number of direct investments in the last few years. As Vasile has mentioned, the listed company has done very well communicating with the investors, and has done very well on financial statements as well. That's why the evolution this year has been very positive. Yeah? Of course, how I'm seeing the MAIB listings, yes, I'm seeing as being a very, very successful listing, because you are seeing a lot of investors, foreign investors as well, US investors as well, looking to take exposure in Moldova. Yeah? This is the only way, this is a very valuable way to give access to those investors to Moldova, because for sure MAIB will be a proxy, as Georgi has mentioned, MAIB will be a proxy for the entire Moldovan economy. So for sure I'm very optimistic that we will have MAIB as a success. Till then you have to solve these regulatory and technical things, because you have to do a link between our central depository. This for me is our only technical stuff, but what is the most important is that the appetite for this kind of investments, both from foreign investors and domestic investors, is there. Yeah? Thank you.
We are all speaking about the benefits of a listed company on an international stock exchange. How does this translate into company's performance from the practical point of view? Just some maybe insights from this point of view.
So I think path to listing is for the best companies, because when you list, as Vasile said, everybody can see your numbers and ask questions. Why you're not performing? Why you're not doing this? And like you need to listen to your investors and adjust your strategy accordingly. So I think listing creates many benefits, like easier access to capital, because if you need money, like for some investments, you can do like bond issue, stock issue, and it's much easier if you are now named to investors, because if you coming out of the blue and say I need 10 million euros, so you need to educate investors, and being listed means that you are known to the market. And also listing gives benefits in transparency, corporate governance, and we as Invalda are listed since 1995. And believe me, when you go through different economic cycles, so of course everybody likes when you successful, profitable, earning money, but being listed means that you have to be transparent also in those periods which are not good. So it's and then if somebody asks a question, so what's your history? You say on the stock exchange you can find our annual report since 1995. So go and read the history if you wish to do so.
And total traceability, that's what matters. Dear ladies, dear gentlemen, we actually have to consider our time and our agenda. So for this very reason, allow me please to really address the final question to each of our absolutely outstanding speakers. And if you can please fit into 2-3 minutes. Mr. Tofan, actually, if you can really wrap up in 3 key recommendations for the Moldovan companies, what exactly should they consider when thinking about listing on international capital market? 3-5 things. Thank you.
Yes, the first one is, it starts, I think, with the corporate governance. This is the basis, this is the level 0. You cannot be a listed company if you pay your employees in cash. If there are any in this room, I hope not. You cannot be a listed company if you have an all-male board or if you have no board at all. You cannot be a listed company if you're doing shady dealings with the state and are not fully transparent and your values are wrong, right? So forget about that. So first you have to get your basics in order, and this starts with transparency and corporate governance. Second, I think second, you will need a strategy and a vision that you can sell to the markets. You know, you'll need an equity story. MAIB has a beautiful equity story. MAIB's equity story is Moldovan's equity story. When we go to meet investors, we talk about Moldova 80% of the time. 80% of the time, because everybody understands. When I buy the #1 bank, I buy the country. So, sorry, I'm not on the payroll of the Moldovan government, but when we go, we sell the country. And this is what you are going to do, because the first question will be, why should I invest in Moldova?
Country identity.
And we spend 80% of our time saying, 2 fantastic women, Maya Sandu, Natalia Gavrilidze, Harvard educated, super high integrity. They have a mandate from the people. They want to do reforms. They'll get us into European Union. That's what the discussion is about. So you have to be ready to sell your equity story, which in our case is really much about the country. So, and the third, I think, you'll have to have the patience and the courage. I have to prepare you for that. There's going to be roadblocks. When we were trying to list Purcari, people will tell you, you're like a bunch of farmers, forget it, like it's never going to happen. Who will buy like a little Moldovan winery, small IPO, weird country, forget it. We overcame that. Now with MAIB, it's not easier, I gotta tell you. Like, I maybe cannot elaborate on all the aspects, but it's also challenging to list MAIB for many reasons, you know? But I'm sure we're going to do it next year. So I wish those of you who consider doing this, I'm looking at Carolina Bugayan, she's from Olchel. She has to roll out 5G in Moldova. Where are you going to get the money? Because we as MAIB are not going to give you the money, right? It's too much money. So she will have to go and find this money. I mean, she will have to find this money, and I think that's why Molchel declared that they are considering capital markets. So you'll have to have the courage, the tenacity, the grit to go through all the barriers, to tell all the naysayers that, you know, we're going to overcome that and go get it done. So that's what I want to finish, guys, like really. Don't listen to those who tell you this is not possible. Go get and go do it.
Very inspiring. And as we all understood, Carolina and Molchel are the next. Okay. Mr. Shahidze, actually, as Mr. Tofan has very correctly mentioned, when we speak about listing of a company, we speak about an identity of a country. We speak about the role of the government. We speak about the role of the National Bank of Moldova in this case, having such outstanding speakers in the previous panel. What would you consider as the key roles of the country governance as a whole when we speak about a listing on an international stock exchange of a company? Thank you.
Sure. I mean, we will give the loans to good companies, but I think one thing which is important is that in every country where people have found access to the capital markets, it happens that the banking sector is much stronger than the countries that do not have access to the capital market. And this mostly differentiates more sophisticated, more financially better, healthier countries from the ones that do not have access to capital markets. And this is exactly how, in this term, the good countries are differentiated from not good countries or not good ones. I mean the financial strengths in this case. Again, what Vasily said, this is important to understand that when the largest bank does an IPO, that can open the gateway for any other company to do the IPO. And I'll tell you the example. We met together with Vasily and without us last Thursday, Morgan Stanley. And they say, we want, I don't know if I can refer them, but I think they say that we want to come to Moldova in February, and our first step will be to come and check you, meet government, meet the NBM, and open the country limit. So when the largest bank does the IPO, it opens the country limit out from the big guys, like I said HSBC, said Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Schroders, BlackRock, and you name them. When they open the country limit, then approaching them from any other company is much easier. From my experience, we have heard the investors who, after investing in TBC, were going and finding the other companies in the real economy to invest, and then there were many such cases and investments. So, for example, the one that I mentioned even invested in the corporate bonds listed locally in Georgia. So, when the largest bank does the IPO, it acts as the integrator of the local businesses into the international capital markets. Clearly, the role of the government, the role of the NBM is the key, because people need to understand why they should invest in the country. And this is what we are doing, this is what we are explaining them, that Moldova has predictable future with the European Union, and the right government doing the reforms means that over time, the living standards will converge to those of the European Union living standards, and any investment fine-tuned for the long term means the right investment, means the one based on the future, whereby living standards will be higher. And any company who wants to do an IPO or who wants to issue the bonds will benefit from the gateway if we are able to open it and if we are able to list Moldovan shares into the Bucharest Stock Exchange. Thank you.
Is for Mr. Tănase. Actually, very important messages have been also reiterated by Mr. Tofan when we speak about transparency, financial reporting, very good governance of the company when we have this ambition of being listed. And believe me, Mr. Tănase, a lot of businesses sitting today in the room, and their presence is absolutely astonishing, are considering this transparency thing. So we have more than 60% of our exports onto the EU market. It also implied a lot of transparency on the private sector. And there are also many other things that enabled and stimulated Moldovan businesses to increase their not only financial transparency but also operational one. What it means from the point of view of being listed. What are the key success factors, and last but not least, what transparency means in this regard?
Transparency and good communication with, and of course, good delivering of financial results, because you still have to deliver financial results. So transparency is not solving everything. Yeah? You have to deliver, you have to be transparent, you have to communicate efficiently. It's very important, and yeah, the final result is the maximization of our company value. Yeah? This is the final consequence of being listed. Yeah? Your company value will be maximized on the stock exchange. But there are many things you can use being listed, and I want to refer to motivating the employers. Yeah? So you have mechanisms to motivate, which are very important mechanisms to motivate your employers. Yes, the labor market is very stretched. In Romania, it's the same case. And the listed company, there are a lot of companies coming to the market to have those mechanisms to motivate their labor. Yeah? And I'm referring here to the stock option plans. Yeah? These stock option plans you are implementing within your company are doing has very important results. Yeah? Practically you are aligning your employer with the company interest, yeah? And the results are very valuable. And in Romania, there are some fiscal incentives as well for implementing those stock option plans. And of course, there are other mechanisms. You are very flexible in deciding your capital structure. Yeah, being listed company, you can issue bonds, you can withdraw equities, you can withdraw bonds. So you have a lot of flexibility according with the valuation of the company. Comparing with the fair value, you have a lot of possibilities to decide the proper capital structure. So in my view, there are only advantages of being listed. And you have to be, of course, you have to be transparent, and you have to implement right corporate governance. But anyhow, you have to do it if you want to grow. Yeah, not so to have a proper corporate governance is very important for any company. Yeah? So it's not a condition only to be listed, but the capital market is imposing you those rules, and is somehow the investors community is guiding you about how to behave, how to communicate. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tănase. Mr. Plunksnės, probably the last question goes to you as a concluding remark, but also, you know, you are an international investor. We want investors in Moldova. 3-5 tips, what as a country we need to do, and also as a private sector, in order to be more attractive for people like you.
I think have more ambitions, and I'm one of the biggest fans of Moldova, and sometimes I have conversations with local people, and they say, look, our country is not rich, we don't have this, we don't have that. And I answer that, so being the poorest country in Europe has the one advantage that you can only grow, and this is really what investors are looking for is the potential to grow. So for the country, I wish that you don't beat yourselves that we are poor, we don't have this, but you have many opportunities to grow, and also what's good that so I'm coming from Lithuania, which is as well a small country. So the open secret is that those big, rich European countries sometimes are lazy, and it's really possible to grow faster than those countries. And for businesses, I think one thing. So we're speaking about listing, but listing means also sharing ownership. So basically, is it better to have 100% of a small company, or let's say 40% of the big company? And so this is the choice you face, and of course one choice is to live as a family company, and it's nothing wrong with that. But another choice, if you have ambitions and want to get bigger, so you have to take outside capital. Is it in the form of bonds or stocks or private investment for a fund? And then with this help, with these competences, you can grow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Plunksnės. I think that today we had an absolutely unique occasion for this audience of probably over 140 companies who are well fit in this very gorgeous room, to be provided with very suggestive, straightforward, and practical messages. And that's what is important, to hear this from the first source, from practitioners and from people who did this. Dear ladies, dear gentlemen, allow us to really express our gratitude to our absolutely keynote outstanding speakers. Mr. George Shahidze, CEO MAIB, the host of today's event. Mr. Vytautas Plunksnis, portfolio investor, head of private equity in Valda. Mr. Adrian Tanasi, CEO of Bucharest Stock Exchange. Thank you for coming, Mr. Tanasi. And Mr. Vasily Tofan, Purcari chairman. Thank you so much for this absolutely.
Yeah, working. One thing, maybe please join us to congratulate happy birthday to Mariana and excellent, excellent role. Thank you.
Support of the authorities is really essential for development of the capital market, and Romania, in this respect, is important for us to have the support of our authorities. So this panel will be about authorities. What we can say as a first signal on behalf of the authorities from Romania is that the development of capital market became a priority. We are going to have a strategy in this respect, which will be launched by the Ministry of Public Finances and Financial Supervision Authority very soon. So I would like to introduce to you the panelists of the following panel. The first intervention will have the Ovidiu Petru, the General Director of Financial Instruments and Investments. Nu se aude. Nu se aude. Nu se aude. So the regulator from Romania. The second speaker will be Dumitru Alaiba, the Minister of Economy from the Republic of Moldova, who is a promoter, as we know, actively promoting the development of capital market in the Republic of Moldova. The third speaker will be Vitalie Lemne, the Vice President of NCFM from the Republic of Moldova, who is supervising the financial market of the country. And the fourth speaker, and last but not the least, Mr. Mihai Precop, Secretary of State, Minister of Finance from the Romania, promoter of the strategy, development strategy related to the capital market, which I referred at the beginning of this introduction. Now, Mr. Ovidiu Petru is not here. He will join us online. So it's really a pity that I didn't manage to reach here. I would have loved to be there with you to have a debate on this topic. And now I'm thinking how to create this bridge between the capital markets from the Republic of Moldova and Romania, how to build them sooner. As my colleague mentioned, we are now involved in a number of projects. It's one of the reasons for which I could not come to Chisinau. We are now having, the strategy of capital market wrapped up. So the strategy of the capital market was finished so long ago in this year, after a long period of consultations with the stakeholders. The project was financed by the European Commission, and we had the consultancies from OECD. As of 2020, we started the discussions with the market, and the OECD drafted a report of the capital market. Starting from this, we developed the strategy of the capital market, and we are working with the Ministry of Finance closely in this on this strategy, and it was approved by it went through a public consultation, and we are now glad that now we received a lot of recommendations, observations that we analyzed them all last week, and now we are finalizing it, and very soon we are going to send it to the Ministry of Finance to be approved. The strategy has a lot of components, this also including these components of streamlining the listing period and steps, access to capital, decreasing the period of streamlining the regulations. These regulations, we need to be aware of the fact that the regulations should be in line with the European recommendations. Another project, Mr. Tanase, I met Mr. Tanase last Friday because we've been discussing recently about new projects. We had consultancies. We discussed with the National Bank about a very important project for the capital market from Romania, and a project that can put Romania on a regional map, and creating a regional hub, and you could also benefit from it at the second stage, when it will be connected to the parties. Yes, counterparts. We had the loan crowdfunding, and here we are happy to be the 5th jurisdictions from the European Union who has such a project law. We authorized the first platform of crowdfunding, and we also are happy to see links with the Republic of Moldova, ties with the Republic of Moldova. Now we are having an analysis for a crowdfunding platform with shareholders from the Republic of Moldova. As to the project on listing MyEIB bank in Romania, as you may know, we started in the authority a number of meetings with the Romanian Stock Exchange Bank representatives and the representatives from the Central Bank of Moldova, and we discussed 3 scenarios of listing, standard scenarios of listing by SPV, and so we happy that we go with this version chosen. It's a very difficult scenario, though. We are encouraging it because once doing the connection between depositors, the Romanian market would become more accessible by the companies from the Republic of Moldova. We also had a number of meetings with the supervision authority from the Republic of Moldova. We had meetings, online meetings, in which all our services were presented. We had an experience exchange with the Moldovan counterparties, and we were happy to have as guests the top management of the NCFM, the president, the vice president we had very good discussions, fruitful discussions, which were conducted through a period of 2 or 3 days, I don't remember, but together we managed to find the best solutions. We presented the regulatory framework, the infrastructure of the market, and we also have a good communication with the National Bank of Moldova. We answered a couple of weeks ago to a letter sent by them. We are discussing technical issues so that we would find the best solution to connect these markets. So with the immediate goal of performing this listing right next year. From our point of view, from the point of view of supervising authority, we are supporting this project of connecting the two markets. Moreover, we are supporting, as we do in all our projects, the dialogue with the market, and I'm referring to the dialogue with the deponents, depositors, authorities, so that we can perform this project at the highest standards, and we can build this bridge. And I'm sure that we will manage very quickly to establish the active bridge between two markets. We thank you a lot. We are standing by you, so supporting you in all your projects. So I wish you best of luck to all your initiatives, for all your initiatives. So, Mr. Director, thank you for your supporting words. Now, Minister of Economy. Now I give the floor to Minister of Economy, Dumitru Alaiba, Minister of Economy from the Republic of Moldova. Good afternoon, everyone. I have the honor to greet you all here from this stage. And I thank you a lot for your invitation. So thank a lot to colleagues from MAIB. I'm really happy to see you all. I was thinking how to start this intervention of mine. And now I recalled that it's been 20 years, and I was together with a lot of you students. We were colleagues in the university when Moldova had gained this title of being the most the poorest country in the EU. So it's been 20 years, but still we have no progresses. We can see that the things are changing, but everything is judged based on comparison with our neighbors, for example. And if we do the zoom out from Chisinau, from the Republic of Moldova, we see that we are not progressing a lot, and and we don't get out of this title that we got 20 years ago. So why this happening? We have to acknowledge that the previous government didn't understand the necessity of economies, of reforms in the economy. Maybe they were delaying it. Maybe they were they didn't care. Maybe they had another priorities. There was corruption. It is quite difficult to struggle to qualitatively advance the strategies and the reforms. It's quite difficult to be fair with different interest groups. So when you don't have a quality leadership, when you don't have a governance with a clear vision on what they want to do in economy and where to guide this country to, so the stagnation comes and inertia is installed, unfortunately. So this is very unfortunate to have this regress. However, in the same time, I'm honored here to be as part of a good governance, and I'm a member of a stable government. For the first time in 30 years, we have a pro-European government, which got obtained, their status. And we already obtained this candidacy to EU. We have a government which is pro-economic reform, pro-business, pro-transparency, and against corruption, and pro-business environment. This is an opportunity that we have to harness, despite of all the crises which are overlapping. My biggest nightmare is that we would be able to manage all the crises and leave everything behind. If we don't manage to do that, we'll have to recognize that we're not better than the previous governments, and because we didn't manage to move to the best direction in order to increase the welfare of this country, to bring investors on the market. And that is why we are we have a feeling of urgency. We understand the importance of everything that we need to undertake, and as Moldova needs to grow with an accelerated rhythm. We need to grow with 2 digits of the GDP. We can do that because we are at a sufficiently lower level, so you can advance in order to overcome the vicious circle of poverty, which we don't deserve. Any of us doesn't deserve. For this, we are obviously trying our best to promote the reforms, the debureaucratization, the elimination of any barriers, because the state has to step back 3 steps back to offer the entrepreneurs, in good environment and good conditions. So regardless of the fact whether they are local or foreign, they have to feel that they can be productive, they can be profitable, so that they can, we can enhance the confidence in ourselves. Of course, if talking about access to finances, this is a reason for which we regress. So the access to financing, besides corruption and bureaucracy, and besides a lot of other barriers to step in and to operate a good business in the Republic of Moldova, access to finance was a barrier, because a shortcoming, because there are no alternatives, and this was mentioned by Mao, to the bank credit. So this is the capital market. It was mentioned by the other speakers, and I will conclude here. It is not about listing MAIB. It's not about listing Purcar or any company which will decide to go on international stock exchange market. It's our biggest interest of the members of the government from the state, so that this happens in a streamlined way and in a very easy way. It should, so the MPs, the governors, we all should understand that this is a national project, and indeed it's not about a company, it's about a significant part of the country's economy, which is which penetrates the international markets. This is all from me. I need to thank you, and I need to run because I have another meeting. Mr. Minister, yes, indeed, the development of the market in Romania became a national project. It's very important to have a capital market. It is important for the welfare of the citizens. I would like to invite here Mr. Vitale Lemne, the NCFM chairperson. Deputy chairperson. Good afternoon, everyone. Excellency, Your Excellencies, honorable assistants, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to participate here in this event dedicated to the launching of MAIB on the international capital market. So this event is a good opportunity to mention the importance of the development. So all the efforts are important, from the issuers to the regulators in this respect. I would like to mention that launching of a company from the Republic of Moldova of actions on international market is a concrete step which is about globalization and financial inclusion. The experience obtained by MAIB in this process can be used by other companies which are currently only intend to attract external capital flux, but can be also an example of good practices and a incentive for other local companies which are still considering these steps. Applying the look-back principle, this project is an opportunity for the regulator, also for the market participants to test in premiere the transition from the local market of the foreign values. This can be very timely because we amended the So obviously we're going to continue to pay good attention to the efforts undertaken by all the participants of this project in view of offering possibility and good support for the local issuers to attract capital to develop their businesses both from within the country and outside the country. With these words, let me wish success to all the participants to this platform, and I hope that this event will be a new step in the process of sustainable development of the Moldovan capital market and in attracting the local investments and foreign investments as well. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Deputy Chairperson, and it's my pleasure now to invite Mihai Precup, State Secretary in the Ministry of Finance of Romania, and the ministry is a good partner, and Mr. Precup comes up with good recommendations regarding the development of the market.
Good afternoon. First of all, allow me to come with a confidence building message. Yesterday I was traveling through Chisinau as a tourist for the first time in Chisinau. I've seen a city and a country which is developing one, and I've seen a country that wants to be part of the EU values. And I think that MAIB listing sets some bridges, because we have been speaking about bridges being built between Romania and Moldova. In this case, we have a specific example of a capital bridge and long-term capitals. What the four speakers were saying, that the key for development is access to financing. And I think you all agree that in order to have a developed country, we need to have developed companies. And in order to have developed companies, we need to have, on the one hand, access to financing, to financial instruments, and on the other hand, we need to have access to capital markets. In Romania, at the level of the Ministry of Finance, last year it was a record year in terms of financial tools which were created. I will not tell you about each and every financial instrument created, but we have looked at a company, at the capital structure of a company, and we've tried to come with financial tools which are adjusted to each category. We speak about equity. This year, there was signed an agreement between the government of Romania and the European Investment Fund for €4 million. which will be dedicated to funds of funds. So we will establish a fund of funds together with the European Investment Fund, which will support investor capital or private equity funds. In 2018, when I came back to the country, private equity industry in Romania was still emerging, and at that time some money was delivered to that, and the 400 million, which is unprecedented amount, will be a game changer for the entire industry. I can see former colleagues coming 2 by 2, 3 by 3 in order to make teams of fund of investments in order to attract that money. Bringing equity and capitalizing Romanian companies will have more candidates for the Bucharest Stock Exchange. And I think liquidities in the banking system in Romania we have sufficient, and also we have liquidities in the stock exchange. We need more capitalized companies which are capable to draw these resources towards real economy. I was saying that it's going to be a game changer because I think this industry is going to explode and have a big long-term impact on the development of Romania and will contribute to the bank intermediation. Given the fact that Moldova and Romania today have an economy, and the EU as well, the financing of the economy based on bank loans. The objective is to go beyond that, to encourage the private equity industry and the capital market. As the general director of the stock exchange was saying this year, we have defined the strategy of the capital market for Romania. And I'm happy to have heard your intervention, the EBRD director's speech, saying that they also want to have a capital strategy in Moldova. Romania has benefited fully from the OECD recommendations, the Organization for Cooperation and Economic Development, and we have received the best practices in terms of corporate governance. Within that strategy, we have been trying to encourage financial education, the level of savings and also investments to encourage cooperation between the Bucharest Stock Exchange and the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Romania in order to have workshops for Romanian companies. But actually, companies from Moldova are welcome to these workshops as well, because we all need to have access to the capital market. So to be aware of the financial resources and financing mechanisms through a capital market. I was speaking about financial education. We have the example of Fidelis securities. The government of Romania issued a number of state securities to be financed directly from the population. That was a real success. I remember in April I was at the stock exchange when we launched the first shows in issues, and in only 2 weeks the government of Romania gathered 2 million lei from residents and non-residents who put their confidence in the Romanian government and placed their money in state bonds. Which for me is an important step with regard to financial education in Romania. On the other hand, we're speaking about green bonds in that capital strategy. We have seen in the past 5 or 6 years an explosion of the industry and investments in green bonds. The government of Romania has been working now in close cooperation with the World Bank in order to establish the procedures for issuing green bonds and for establishing a pipeline. A project package with a green component to be financed through the capital market. And I think this time as well, the stock exchange will be a strategic partner for the government of Romania in financing strategic investment projects on long term. I don't think we face a problem of access to liquidities. In Romania, we have BNRR, National Program for Resilience and Economic Recovery, 29 million euro for 5 years. 13% of the GDP of 2019, and maybe today it would be 10%, which is a huge amount of money. And next year, Ministry of Finance has like over 7% of the GDP, 12 billion lei allotted for investments. So what we need is companies coming with initiatives in order to start these initiatives and investments and to take them over and develop them. Also in the strategy of capital market, we have to stimulate the corporate shares, and I worked within the European Bank for Investments, and which is not a competitor of EBRD, but another big infrastructure funder, probably the biggest one in the world. And I remember very well that most of the big infrastructure projects were carried out in public-private partnerships. In Romania, through the capital market strategy, we wish to stimulate public-private partnerships and the issuance of corporate bonds in order to find alternative sources for financing the strategic infrastructure of Romania. Next year, most probably, we will have a record listing for the Central and Eastern Europe. We're speaking about Hydroelectrica. Competitor will be Allegro in Poland. Will have even a bigger capitalization than what happened with Allegro. We have looked together with the Bucharest Stock Exchange to see the types of investors who invested in Poland compared to those who are on the Bucharest Stock Exchange. Over 70% of them are already active in the Bucharest Stock Exchange, and out of the other 30%, most of them already have investments or have had already investments and had portfolios on Bucharest Stock Exchange. And we think that Hydroelectrica is going to be a success example for the Bucharest Stock Exchange and will contribute clearly to bringing new investors in Romania, probably utilities investors, green investors from London, and will contribute to developing the capital market in Romania. All the more we have access to that capital market, and I think the exercises we are carrying out today to attract companies from Moldova towards capital market, which is regulated at European level, at European standards, which is protected by NATO, and which has access to European values, I think is the stability which is needed by any investor and any company in order to have long-term access to financing. The government of Romania holds around 216 companies directly, which generate around 7% of the GDP of Romania and hire about over 83,000 workers, staff members within these companies. Me, as a left-side person, I think it's important for the government to have a big share in the economy and intervention channels in the economy, because I've seen that during the crisis times, you need companies by which you could intervene directly in order to protect the purchasing power of the population. We have seen what has happened recently, currently in Ukraine with the aggression and the war. We need companies that would ensure basic services when nobody wants to ensure medical basic services. We've seen what has happened with public hospitals in Romania. They were the most accessed by COVID patients more than the private ones, and I think Romania has such big capacity for intervention on the real economy. 216 companies, many of them like Hydroelectrica with millions of euro annual profits, gives a big power to the Romanian government, which we need to be able to use and to become regional leaders in different sectors like the energy one. Joining the EU and NATO were zero priority. Now the zero priority of Romania is to join the Organization for Cooperation and Economic Development. And we think that being part of the group of developed countries and consolidated economies will allow Romania to attract even more strategic investors, to attract even more investments in Romania, and perhaps even more important than anything is to create well-paid jobs. Being part of OECD, I think, will help us have more transparent and more advanced companies. And we have 216 companies. 18 of them have already been listed on the Bucharest Stock Exchange, which makes them fulfill the highest corporate governance standards. The MAIB listing, in our opinion, represents a bridge of capital between Romania and the Republic of Moldova. And I think if we succeed both in the Republic of Moldova and in Romania to have as many performant and advanced transparent companies as possible, we will contribute to attracting Moldovans from the diaspora in projects for development of the Republic of Moldova. And I think together with the diaspora, since I've lived myself in Paris for 15 years and then in Luxembourg, so having companies which are involved in countries' development projects, we will be able to build countries which are, have advanced developments in line with the EU standards. We cannot hear. As a final message, the success of MAIB, all development projects in the development of Romania capital market would become projects for development of the capital market in the Republic of Moldova, and I am fully convinced of that. Here I will conclude the introduction, and I would like to invite our partner from ARIR, Daniela Șerban, to moderate the third panel. Please, Daniela. Good afternoon. My name is Daniela Șerban. I've left being Cojocaru from Republic of Moldova in 2005, and I'm glad to be ambassador of the Republic of Moldova, and ambassador of the capital market from Romania in Moldova. I'm happy for this invitation, and I would like us to discuss how could you become a listed company, and how would you stay a successful listed company? Some of the information that I've prepared and which we are going to discuss with our invitees put the Stock Exchange of Bucharest in a favorable context with the record listings last year, and you'll see leaders from all the economic sectors listed at the Romanian Stock Exchange. I invite here Bogdan Cepreanu, country manager Wood & Company, Narcisa Oprea, Schonherr partner, Cristian Petre, portfolio manager and pensions, and Cristian Matei, senior broker, Tradesville. So we will directly go into the subject because we don't want to exceed the time allotted. Romania is on a road of visibility, increasing the visibility. What's the role of Moldova in that landscape? And I will start with Bogdan regarding the appetite of investors towards the companies listed to Bucharest Stock Exchange, and what's the path of Romania as an emerging country. Thank you very much for the invitation. We will try to move quickly because we are going beyond the agenda because it's serious if you delay the lunch. So, I've been in the stock exchange since 2000, when the capitalization of the market was under 500 million euro. And daily amounts, volumes were around 350,000 euro. And today we have over 40 billion capitalization, around 10 million liquidity. And we would like to have it higher, and probably we will have it higher. The road to here hasn't been smooth, and I'm saying that because I think Moldova doesn't need to do the same thing. That's an advantage. The companies from Moldova now can come get listed in Bucharest, but in order to increase the capitalization and the volumes in such a way, two things have happened. The first one was the access of international investors, high access of international investors. At the beginning, there were few of them. You could count them by the fingers because of two reasons. One was a technical one. Technically, it was very hard to be able to make transactions with Romania, a thing which has changed, and now there is no more problem with that. And the latest investors that will be settled with the occasion of Hydroelectrica IPO. And secondly, from point of view of investors, Georgie mentioned earlier about that. If you only have a company where you invest in a country, you will think many times if to do that effort, because first you need to understand the country, to understand the macroeconomics, to convince the investment committees that that's an investable country. And it was hard to create a critical mass of investable companies in order for the investors to only have to think whether they want or not to invest in that company, rather than thinking that they can't invest in that country because it's not worth the effort to open the market. Can't hear. Now I'll ask Narcisa Obrea to speak about the legal aspects. If it's possible, I'd like you to leave my microphone open. Thank you, Mr. Crămpeanu. So, since we were speaking about access, what's the legal framework and whether there are some hindrances in Romania for possible listing of a company from the Republic of Moldova? Good afternoon. I'm really glad to be present here today. As the minister was saying earlier, I have the feeling that the steps we're making are small steps, and that we can't get quickly where we want. And I remember that was my feeling many years ago at the beginning of the life of stock exchange. I've been working since '98 in the stock exchange market, and Bogdan actually provided us a picture in figures. We have increased a lot because we believed in our power, because we used the opportunities. And coming back to your question, Daniela, there is no hindrance actually. Probably you will be surprised since this comes from a lawyer, and usually lawyers tend to complicate things. Well, if you are a company coming from Moldova which wants to list your shares at the Bucharest Stock Exchange, you need to observe the basic European requirements. They are the same for any European market. To have 25% of the shares publicly owned, a minimal dispersion of the shareholders, and to have anticipated capitalization of €1 million. It's very easy to meet these requirements. Of course, if we look at the peculiarities of the Bucharest Stock Exchange for the shares, there we have two categories. The standard category with €1 million, the anticipated value of companies before listing, but also premium category where you should have a value of a free float of €40 million, but these are not complicated requirements. On the other hand, we shouldn't forget about the fact that if you are a company from Moldova, you will continue to operate according to the Moldovan legislation. Of course, the fact that you are entering on the radars of the investors with the shares listed on a European uniformized market, you need to be transparent. I will not speak about the benefits of the transparency. They have already been mentioned by other speakers. But what's important is that listing the values of the stock exchange of Bucharest means that you have to observe the transparency requirements. Of course, my distinguished colleagues will speak about the expectations of the investors. It's not sufficient to tick this requirement to make a tick. You need to convince them. When you prepare for listing, you will convince through the documents. Therefore, the listing particulars, which is very well regulated at European level. And I think this is an advantage for the companies of the Republic of Moldova, which is going to be listed, because they're going to learn communicating in the EU, European, in the language of the European markets, with a few steps before the country joins the EU. The rest of technicalities, interconnection of depositories, and adjusting some issues, some things in the legislation of Moldova in order for it to become more familiar for the investors. I think things have already been, will be already solved with the listing of MAIB. That's a very good news. Thank you, Narcisa Oprea, for that. As the president of the Romanian Association for Relationship with Investors, I would like to add about the fact that the listing is just the beginning. Basically, the long-term strategy is the one that makes the difference, and the relationship with the investors. And here I'm looking at Cristian Petre. If you can tell us what are the expectations of the investors, and you represent one of the biggest institutional investors in Romania. What do they expect, and what do they follow, actually, the investors? Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. As many of the other participants, I'm for the first time in Chișinău, and I feel very well. As expectations, I apologize if I repeat, being a minority shareholder for us, the corporate governance principles are very important. And for that, the naming by independent administrators or appointing minority shareholders after listing. Another thing that was mentioned by the four speakers is aligning the interest of the minority shareholders with the strategic ones, and I think here is the variable remuneration in shares should be provided, and including the price of the share in the performance indicators of the management. It depends a lot for the listing. It depends what type of money there are, if there are newly issued shares, or if it's a sale of existing shares. It often happens also as minority shareholders, we support the management, but we have limited resources. We can't do the strategy of a company. That's why it's very important to have a succession plan after the listing with regard to the management. So this would be the very important thing to do. Of course, transparency and the communication and the participation in events with investors, but this will happen following the listing. Thank you very much. Now I'm moving towards Justina Matei. Cristian Matei, who represents the most important, the biggest retail broker. Yeah, the biggest clients retail basis. What physical entities expect from a listed company, and what do they follow? What the investors look for? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation. That's how I should have started. So, by the end, the investors wish to have the following thing. They wish to have an enterprise with a history of profitability, to have a minimum 3 years history at the stock exchange. Minimum 3 years of activity in general before coming to the on the stock exchange. The third would be a specific dimension of the business, because otherwise there is no sense to get to it. So they need to have around 2 million euro turnover. And that's for the size of the business, in terms of the size of the business. Because at the startup stage, there are different types of financing for companies which have no big history. Then what they need to have is to have an interesting and developing field of activity, an attractive field of activity, maybe IT, maybe new technologies, maybe energy is now fashionable, defense industry, given the existing situation. So that should be an interesting field of activity. Probably those who do horse-related industry will not be so successful because this field will not explode in the future years. The fourth thing is to have a potential for further development. So the society knows where it goes. The company knows where it moves. It has a quantitative development plan or extensive development plan. They want to open new representative offices in other countries. For instance, IT companies, or they have an intensive development. They launch new products where they have ownership. So they have development potential in order to acquire new markets and achieve new sales. And last but not least, to have a specific positive dynamics. So investors look for companies which have increasing turnovers, increasing net profit, and increasing profit margins. So these to give the sensation, the feeling to the investors that in time the company will grow and the investors will have to gain. So these conditions are taken globally. If the other things compensate for the weaker points, you still can do it. And because we are getting close to the conclusions, I'd like to come back to the presentation of the Bucharest Stock Exchange, telling about a few of the recent transactions happening at the Bucharest Stock Exchange. We are going to have examples from the regulated market. There are 3 of them. We have on the following slide a few of the transactions. Here we have the representative sectors and the biggest players, and on the next slide we have a few examples of transactions, and I'm going towards Ovidiu Strâmbianu in order to understand what are the lessons learned for these transactions. Of course there are many more, but this has been a selection in order to see the amounts. We speak between 74 million on the main market. Hidroelectrica is going to be a bigger transaction, and on the smaller market, Aerobs, we speak about €500,000 and 15 million euro, the biggest transaction that happened there. What have been the lessons learned in terms of, since you interacted and were part of one of those transactions? Well, indeed, we can learn lessons from any transaction, and the main lesson is the one about which was mentioned by basically everyone here with regard to transparency and corporate governance. The lack of good corporate governance is reflected sooner or later in the value of the company, whether in the IPO or afterwards. IPO is just the first step, and then, like in the sports, sometimes it's harder to maintain it and to continue developing. In terms of transaction size, there is a story here. 10 years ago, if somebody asked us, probably we would say about speaking about the main market. You could do an IPO of 20 million, and the value of the deal. And 5 or 6 years ago, it was about 50 million, and now, and this comes from the feedback we are receiving from the investors, because we have had transactions with around from 50 to 70 million transactions, and the investors are not very happy with the liquidity, the further liquidity in the secondary market. And now we speak about 100 million as a reasonable size. Of course, it depends a lot. If it's a company which grows very quickly, then you could go lower with the value of the transaction, because the size of the package of the investor will get quick where he wants. But if we speak about a stable company which grows harder, that's not so true. I would ask Cristian Petre about the size and an ideal candidate from the perspective of an IPO. We are looking, following the more mature companies with the history of profitability. We're not looking for specific sectors. What's important for us is the price. As long as there is consistency and stable or increasing profits. We would prefer to have more innovational sectors, given the concentration of the stock exchange on petrol and gas and banks. And we would prefer growing companies, because we have companies which pay big dividends. But at the same time, we wouldn't reject any option, because we have constant entry of money. We have reached 1 billion per month in the system. Starting with January 2024, the contribution in P2 will increase to 3.42 of the salary, so it will have around 1 billion entering, and 25% of the money will go into shares. An ideal candidate, I was mentioning about old money and new money, so they need to have a very clear plan what they are doing with the money, because they are coming to investors to ask for money, and then they need to know clearly what they are doing, whether they plan it for merger and procurements, for internal improvements, for other growth projects. So they need to know for sure what they're going to do with that money, in order for the investors to be able to build some expectations regarding the company, and to be able to develop a target market, target price. So that's in general about the biggest expectations. Well, belonging to an index would be very important. For instance, if we look at the BET index, might seem restrictive, but I'm sure that there are companies of this size in Moldova as well. So there should be 50 million euro capitalization of free float, and 110 million capitalization of a member. At the same time, regardless of how big or small the company is, the work from the investor would be the same. For instance, in our case, it would be hard to invest in a company that represents less than 1% of the shares portfolio, because if they have 1 or 5, actually the workload is the same. Well, let's say there are 3 or 4 companies, but so you need to pay the same attention in terms of monitoring and in terms of revising the results. What would be the minimal ticket with which you enter such a transaction at the beginning? Well, a minimal ticket is 1% of the shares portfolio, so around 18 million euro, the biggest fund, and 1 million for the optimal fund, and around 300,000 euro current turnover. So let's keep the conclusions for Narcisa. What are the costs for the listing? Is it expensive? Was it cheaper at the other side? Or and a few of the companies who have moved towards the stock exchange, what are the costs for the listing? Christian, I'm asking you. Do you have any lessons learned from the previous transactions?
So first of all, we need to look back a bit the companies. The market of the company changes while listing. In fact, there will appear new activities like investor relationship, or there will be established a board, administration council. So the life changes a bit, and the costs also changes in terms of staff, in terms of activity. It doesn't mean that if you are listed, you perform the first issuance and you're all right, and you forget about it and you take some other actions. All the time you're going to finance through the capital market. There will be a period posting, you're going to increase the capital. Maybe you're going to issue some other instruments, maybe bonds or something, maybe. Anyway, you are all the time will be in the contact, and you'll have this concern, and that is vis-a-vis the in terms of cost as well. So it does mean that I wanted to have 5 million in this with this listing. I didn't take it all. I took only 3, so I got angry, and that's it. So no, it's a continuous dancing process. It's not a blitzkrieg, it's not like a flash. So now regarding the costs of the company as such, regarding the effective costs of the process, in principle, there will be costs with the intermediary, so with me, so to say. The costs with the intermediary, there will be one-time costs, one-time expenditures. In principle, we are going to keep in contact. I'm going to take the financial data of yours, and I will do the free charge assessment of your company. Then I will send you a proposal. We consider that you can obtain with the increase of X capital, increase this Y sum of money. And when we agree according the financial proposals, how much we issue, the volume of issuance, I could tell you the effective costs, because in fact the costs with the intermediaries ad valorem is regarding its in terms of the costs. So you can try. The assessment is free of charge. We will meet afterwards, and we will exchange business cards. So as of 2020, we listed 31 companies. We financed 31 companies. There was a total number of 40 deals because we financed different instruments. And as of 2020, we managed subscriptions from our customers. We can tell you that we have the biggest clients database. So over 213 million euro in these 2 years. Okay. So that was regarding the intermediary costs, one-time costs. There are additionally costs regarding authorities, the Financial Supervision Authority, Bucharest Stock Exchange, Central Depository. So the costs are quite low here. So I don't know exactly the sum. So it's 1 million something, so 0.003% as as a cost in the relationship with authorities. There are additional costs, a number of additional costs. We are going to give you concrete indications, and we are going to give you a wide range from where to choose with the other activities which are helping and preparing the listing, such as the lawyers' costs, the PR costs, the audit expenditures. Anyway, you have 1 year time free consultancy regarding, as of the moment of listing, you have 1 year free consultancy. So the messages, that means that the messages of all the people speaking here are something like, we have money in Romania. If you're coming with a company, you'll definitely find money. Now I will address to Narcisa how long this process is lasting, because I know that you are involved from T0 and even afterwards, and what are the lessons learned from the previous transactions. I don't think that there is absolute truth here. Whenever you get listed, you start a partnership with the future financiers. You have to get prepared, so it can, seem easy, the rule of transparency, but it's not easy. And you should know that in principle, the confidence, the trust of the investors is being gained whenever you come to the market timely, but you lose it very easily if you don't keep the standards up. The lesson is that you need to get prepared for the life as a listed company, and it is work to do before getting listed. So depending where you start from, depending how sophisticated the organization of the company is and how it functions, so it's quite difficult to give you a time scale which functions. On the other hand, it's not easy to prepare a prospect. It's your business card before investors, in front of investors, and it's so the measure, the extent to which the company was preparing, auditing financial situations from IFRS. So because the auditing is a serious exercise, you need to have this audited exercise, and if you didn't pass, you need to budget some time more with the auditors. In order to have an answer to your question, I would say that for a mature issuer preparing for listing, probably there will be 3-6 months periods depending on the previous preparations. So that would be the estimate period of time. Once listed, you referred, we are waiting to ARIR, it's Association of Listed Companies, and now we have 40 members on board, and we are discussing about good practices in the relationship with the investors, and it's not sufficient to do whatever the law requires. The investors appreciate proactivity, so we organize conferences with the investors, we update websites, we enter data in Excel, we do updated presentations, we participate in events, so that means that you become a public company on a wider stage. So I would like to thank to the panelists. Some of them are for the first time in the Republic of Moldova. Thank you so much. So lunchtime now.
plan, proiect, cod scris, bucuria locului nou pe care l-am deschis, speranța care îl ajută pe fiecare român să spună pe drumul lung, pe drum rămân. România crește cu fiecare companie, cu fiecare român care alege să investească. Suntem aici să vă aducem împreună. Bursa de Valori București. Viitorul e al celor care investesc în el.
Moldova is a dynamic country of 2.9 million people on the EU border. It is an emerging economy that has grown by 4% annually in the last 10 years and still has a very high potential. Moldova has been building strong bridges with the EU and the world for the last 30 plus years. Since 2014, Moldova has been part of the association agreement with the EU guaranteeing virtually barrier-free trade with the bloc. In June 2022, Moldova became the official EU candidate country, a moment of immense pride for us all. Moldova has an open and well-regulated banking system. However, the penetration of banking services is low, with only 24.5% loans to GDP and only 4% mortgage loans to GDP, figure being among the lowest in the peer group. All this indicates significant potential for growth in the near future. MAIB is the preeminent leader of the Moldovan bank. Agro-industrial bank, MAIB has 30 plus years of history, along which it showed its high potential, resilience, and agility. Last year, MAIB, in order to reflect the changing needs of the customers, MAIB launched an ambitious transformation that includes putting the customer at the center. We make sure that in all the decisions we make, customers are at the center of these decisions. We have changed the branch service model, refreshed our focus on customer experience. Orchestrating digital ecosystems. Not only are we launching initiatives to be the indisputable leader in digital space as planned projects with Elvehu and Face ID, as well as new design, but also we establish